higher education. So what have do you live in New Jersey? I forget.
Yeah, I live on campus. Actually, I work for St. Peter's as a community director, so I oversee all
Okay.
of the residence halls and the RAs. So I'm technically essential personnel, and I'm here no matter what.
Okay, so what has the communication been like so far coming from campus?
Today has probably been the most communication. Last week we got an email. Obviously, I'm sure you've been up to date with all of like the university emails, just general stuff. And
Yeah.
then today we got the email about classes going online, which obviously as a graduate student doesn't affect me, but all of my students it affects a lot. And we sent out a notice from Residence Life with additional information. So the last 2 days we've been prepping for this. Literally emails like
Mm-hmm.
so long, emails to RAs, emails to residents, emails to guests, emails to everyone. That's all I've been doing until 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night is working on actual work stuff, and it's been a struggle. But we sent out a lot of stuff today. We're restricting all guests. Residence halls will be staying open. Dining facilities will be staying open to
Mm-hmm.
provide everything for students. And we're here. We're on duty and on call 24/7. So that's been a lot of today's stuff. Is obviously classes are closed, but campus is running, and we're all here. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my wife works at the University of Wisconsin Green Bay. She's the distance education coordinator, and up until today, she only started a few months ago. And up until today, I mean, UWGB, she came from the East Coast. She came from, Albany and New Jersey, New York was her background. So we're pretty backwaters, up here at UWGB. It's a nice tree-lined little wooded campus. A couple dormitories. It's low key. Nobody gets too worked up about anything. Technology isn't that big a deal, and even though they have 4 sites, they have 3 remote sites that are all connected. They would connect with a virtual classroom, and they really just didn't pay much attention. And she couldn't believe, just coming from the East Coast and what she's used to, that they were so policy poor, and that they were really not. They never would have been prepared for anything like this. They decided today that they were going to keep everybody off campus for the next couple of weeks. I think 1 weeks was spring break, so it was convenient, but this way they can get everything kind of cleaned up and they can have everyone work remotely. For me, I work for, a company, obviously, that supports colleges, and one of my key clients is Yeshiva University. And they were one of the first ones that were identified, a student on campus that had the virus, and they had to start going through with contingency plans and everything else. And so I think the big lesson here for everyone right across the board is everybody's policy poor. Nobody was ready. Nobody say, yes, we have a contingent disaster, relief plan for a pandemic. Well, you don't expect to. And even if you did have some sort of a contingency plan, it wasn't necessarily for the right circumstances. A lot of the contingency plans are things that you see on campuses nowadays are for shooters, because that's the threat lately that has been getting the media and attention, and people are seeing it happen. So after the fact, after you have a Virginia Tech shooting or something like that, everybody's up to date on their policies and practices around what do we do if we have an active shooter on campus. But nobody said, okay, and what do we do if there's a power outage for a month, or what do we do if there's a pandemic that we have to shut down for, because you don't think of it until it happens. So for a yeshiva, the thought was, we need to see how quickly we can shut everything down and move everything to online, move all of our courses online. So I'm going to share my screen here. So for me, as the first of all, I've got twofold responsibilities really that are involved in all this. One of them is I'm the LMS administrator, so I'm the one that has to make sure that Canvas is working and it's up and running. And if anything happens and somebody can't get in, I'm the one that has to figure all of that out. Second of all, they decided that they were going to supplement their courses with Zoom, which is obviously the web conferencing tool I'm using right now. That they wanted to have Zoom configured to be built in and work with Canvas. So on the technical end, I had to go in and I had to integrate Zoom and have it set up so that faculty can click on Zoom and go ahead and schedule a meeting and launch a meeting and run it from there. So that's the technical end of it, right? Then we get the human end of it. So here we had 3,000 courses in spring 2020. Of those 3,000 courses, I ran a report in Canvas that showed 2,200 of those courses have not been touched in Canvas. 2,200 of them are blank.
Really?
Yep, course shells. Because if Rabbi Rabinovitz is teaching his Jewish studies course face-to-face, he's not bothering to set up his Canvas shell or to open it or to put in a syllabus or to do whatever else. So one thing that I'm doing as the Canvas LMS administrator is helping them see or providing them that information by going into Canvas and running reports. So if I can go in as administrator, I can go into the settings and then I can choose reports. And so for example, there's a report called a zero activity report, and it'll give me a list of all the students that have not been active in a term. So if I run that report for spring 2020, and then it'll kick out a file and it'll be a list of names of these are all the students that are in spring 2020 that have not been active in their course. That gives us something to track down, right? Let's look up these students, and I'm not going to, yeah, you won't see the whole names. But then we have our list.
How many students are in that institution? Do you know off the top of your head?
It's around, actually I could tell you. Statistics, 4,950.
That's a fair amount then. That'd be a mid-sized institution.
Yep. So here's the technical end of it. Great. It's all configured, it's all working, but how do I take 2,000, or 600 Rabbi Yavinovitzes and teach them how to first log into Canvas and then how to set up a discussion or post their syllabus or do whatever it is that they have to do, and to be able to do this very, very quickly and across a broad scale. So the functioning end of that end is right now, I'm putting together a course. It's called Online at YU. And I'm granted there have been, trainings and training materials developed before, but it had to be very narrow and focused, and it had to be very, very purposeful. I don't know if are you still going? Because you're frozen up on my screen, so I don't know if you're. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. There you are.
There we are.
Yep, your camera froze up, so okay. So even though there's been a ton of training materials and things like that created in the past, I had to start over and I had to create something that was very, very direct and very purposeful. And it's assuming that somebody's never been in Canvas before and they need to have an online course come Monday. It's got to be handheld, step-by-step, spoon-fed. This is what you need to know. This is how to do it. So that's pretty much what I've built here and what we're deploying. And we're just starting with the first assumption is, can they log into Canvas or not? And there's a video if they like video, and then there's a PDF if they want to print a PDF and go through step by step. And so that's been the approach as far as how are we going to deal with it from a standpoint of people. Like for my company, so we have probably about 6 of us, 5, 6 of us that are dedicated to academic support, but we are also committed to 10 clients across the country at this time where we're developing courses and doing all sorts of that other stuff. And now it's not only the clients that we have now, but it's other colleges that maybe they use our technical services, but now they realize they're going to need us academically to help them scale up very quickly. So New York Law School is another one that I've never interacted with them before, but my boss just called me yesterday and said, New York Law School. They contacted me. They said, hey, we need help. We need to get Zoom integrated into Blackboard. We need to get it up and running. We need to have our faculty using it, and we're going to have to do it very quickly. So it very quickly has become a plate spinning, circumstance. And my phone is off the hook all day, and my emails are even more so off the hook all day. And I'm just trying to keep everything running. And here's the thing: this is just starting.
Yes.
This is just beginning. It's going to get worse before it gets better. So, an interesting thing. I know I shared the distance education readiness document that was something that I created that we're sharing with our clients to say this is a good place to get started if you want to know if you're ready to deliver your courses at a distance now or not. And so I built that as a checklist more than anything of them the right questions, because they don't even know what questions to ask. If you asked a college, are you ready to go online tomorrow? They wouldn't even necessarily know what questions to ask. So this was a start of, okay, these are the things that you should be assessing. You should be assessing your learning management system, any contract limitations, right? Do you have a limitation that says how many users? Are you paying per seat? Are you, what type of licensing do you have? What third-party tools and integrations do you have? Do you have like a video hosting like Kaltura? Do you have a third-party engagement tool like PlayPosit? What are your assets? What about how your courses are created? Are they created automatically at the start of a new term? Does a computer system from the registrar kick information into your LMS and say, create a shell for all of these courses? Or does somebody have to request, I want a shell for my course, and then someone else has to go and set that up? Then once the shell is created, how does the content get into the shell? Do you have a master course somewhere that they just copy and spit out so that everybody's teaching from that? Or is it up to the instructor to build their course and teach it the way that they want to teach it? And how are they being used right now? What's the volume of active and inactive courses that you have? Authentication. What if you have tests that are high stakes tests that are required for some sort of accreditation that the student has to verify who they are when they take this? Do you have a proctoring tool like ProctorU, or do they have a proctoring center? What are the limitations in terms of licenses, recording limits, and concurrent users for web conferencing tools? Let's see. Do faculty need VPN access for anything if they had to go home and work from home? What are the limitations going to be there? What are your communication systems? What email system? Do you use Microsoft Teams? Do you use Google? Do you use Slack? Do you use Skype? How? And then here's another question that you might not think to ask. What about authorized and unauthorized? And what about departmental and institutional? Because I've been to colleges where 3 or 4 different departments have shelled out money for their own separate web conferencing. So one of them's, Adobe, whatever I forget what it was called that they had for theirs. And then another one's using web meeting and one's using Zoom. and one's using, whatever, that becomes incredibly challenging for your tech support department, because they have to be able to support and know how to support everything. And the minute that...
And there's no consistency for students at that point either.
Exactly. You get it. Exactly.
That's
no consistency for
huge
students.
in my mind. Yeah, then they have to learn 4 different platforms in a matter of days to be able to continue their education, that they never expected it to be like this. They're not paying for this. They're not in for this. They didn't sign up for this.
Exactly. And then you've got people who don't wait. They don't wait for the university to come up with a solution. They're going to go out there and they're going to find and they're going to make their own solutions. So all of a sudden you have somebody teach Google Classroom. And then you start to run into issues, not just that it's confusing for students, but you also run into problems like, how are you able to document this learning across the institution? If you have one instructor going rogue that's teaching all of their lessons with, Google Hangouts or something, and that's not officially part of the university systems, they can't document or track or record or preserve anything that they've done. So we want to try to approach everything institutionally as much as possible. And then we have to start thinking about this. We're going into a new term. So we have to think about the library. Are they fully online? Tutoring, is that fully online? What about the bookstore? What about the registrar? What about the bursar? What about the help desk? Are all of these things ready for 100% remote support? If you have an on-campus help desk and none of them are on campus, could they function? So then we get to the human capability. Like, what's the overall technical ability of faculty and staff who have to do those things? Are they ready? What personnel is dedicated to instructional design or to training? And what's the readiness of support systems personnel to engage students fully online? Hardware. What does it say in the institutional policies that students are required to have from a technological standpoint in order to take their classes? If your technical requirements did not require students to have a computer with a microphone and a web camera, then it makes it more challenging to say, well, you're required to use this for class. So make sure that information that goes out to the students is up to date and they know what they're required to have. What about faculty and staff? Are they supposed to have their own laptop in case they all have to work from home? Is the institution going to provide laptops to them all and support them all if they have to work from home? What about hardware and software licenses? VPN software, anything else that they might need to work remotely? What about mobile devices? Are we all ready to support with and use mobile devices for learning? And then finally, as if we don't have enough other things to think about, accessibility. The day and age that we live in, we have to understand what the ADA says are the requirements about providing digital learning fully accessible to learners with disabilities. And that's not an option. That is a legal requirement. So just for example, this conversation that we're having right now, this does not fall under accessibility law because this is a conference which is considered telecommunication. So I don't have to have somebody sitting in the corner and signing or typing so that the words are going across the screen. However, once this meeting is over and I record it and I save it to the course, it becomes an academic artifact and should be fully captioned in order for me to put it in the course.
So that it's ADA accessible for anyone who may need that.
Correct. So that's what this document was for. It was to help a college that's coming to grips with the fact that they might have to go fully online to recognize where their gaps are, what might be missing. Now this one, remote teaching resources for business community. This is a shared Google document that has the remote teaching and learning tips, tricks, policies, and whatever else for, what are we up to now? 255 schools.
These are all the schools that have moved to an online format in the last couple days?
No, this is just a collection of schools that have a public policy or a guidance or
Oh, okay.
readiness to. And it's definitely not all of them, because I don't think Yeshiva's in here, because I would have been the one to put it up here. But this is
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Is Coastal Carolina University on there?
Let's take a look.
So the reason I ask is because I went there for undergrad, and it is. Yeah. So I believe it was my sophomore year, we really started getting hit with some heavy hurricanes, and we ended up 2 or 3 years in a row, school getting canceled for a week, 2, 3, 4 weeks at a time. So while I was there, they actually developed an entire online learning format that was able to be initiated at the drop of a dime if need be. So every single year for the last, I think, 4 years, they've had to enact it at some point, mostly for hurricanes. That's really been the big thing. But I have, friends that still work there, friends that go to school there, people that are, finishing up. And when they just made the decision today to move over, and I actually have a friend that works there and works with their emergency management team through academics, and he said that they literally walked in a room, they said, is this what we need to do? Yes, this is what we need to do. Great, we're ready to go, and just clicked yes. Like, it was so easy. There was no questions. There was no if it's available. It was, we already have this planned. We already know what it's going to look like, and all of our students have already done this because of the fall. In the fall during hurricane season, we had this happen. So it's interesting to see a school like that where, because they have reasons to have that all ready because of hurricane season, it's so easy. Whereas, you're looking at the school like you're talking about, or even here at St. Peter's, they say they're ready, but then you talk to students and it's like, well, my professor hasn't touched Blackboard all semester, so how do I know they're going to know how to do this? And I'm like, I can't help you there. I can just only hope for the best,
Well, the beauty of this is that this is a crowdsourced document. This Daniel Stanford from DePaul, he set up a Google form and put it out there to the community at large so that people could say, hey, this is my university, here's our webpage or our resources or whatever. And that's how this, huge 250 some linked document was created. It really speaks to the nature of the academic community and how we are about sharing our combined, resources, and that way we don't all have to reinvent the wheel. I've opened about 15 or 20 of these links myself and looked at, so how did they approach it? What data did they include? Can I copy what they did and replace it with the information for my university? And the more of these you look at, you realize that there has been a lot of copying and reproducing, and just which is absolutely fine. I mean, we're not sitting here worried about plagiarism and with something like this. We're worried about helping the academic community continue to go in some trying times.
I love this, because you think of universities as being in such a competition, and how, especially coming around to a new school year, this is the time that everyone's like, come to us and nobody else. And then you look at this and they're so willing to be open with sharing and helping the academic community, and really wanting to put their resources out there for others to be able to succeed as well.
Yeah, and everyone's taken slightly, different, and taken their own approach to how they're going to do it. So then just outside of that, so talking about just administratively as a college, you also have to have some hard conversations around what are we going to do if, okay? So we got to go through all of the what ifs. What if one of our students who's been on campus is, diagnosed with coronavirus? How are we going to respond? What are we going to communicate? To whom are we going to communicate that? And what's the response going to be? You shouldn't be closing based on, anything other than having a plan. And we're going to close. These are the circumstances. If you don't have a plan, that's one thing. But you're teaching class, and you have 25 students in the classroom, and right at that point in time, you find out that one of those students is infected. What is your next step? You keep the students in the classroom? Do you send them back to their dorms? How are you going to react depending on what happens? It's been tough for yeshiva. Already they're culturally isolated because they are an extremely devout Jewish community. Their basketball team, they were undefeated. They won like 27 basketball games. They've never been this good. They've never made it as far as they made it this year. They got to their divisional playoff game last week, and the first thing that happened to them was DoubleTree canceled their reservation.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and there was only like two students and one professor that had been isolated, and it had nothing to do with the basketball team. But Hilton, oh yeah, sorry, you're not staying here. Then their playoff game, which was to be played at like 2:00 or 1:00 on a Friday, the other team that they were playing, that school's administration put the game on hold. We're not so sure that we want our kids playing against yeshiva in this basketball game. That ended up procrastinating the start of the game by almost an hour and a half until the school's administration finally approved that they could play the game. Yeshiva recognizes Shabbat, which is their Sabbath, starting at 10 minutes before sunset on Friday. Mm-hmm. So ending of that, postponing of that game almost put it to the point where the boys were not going to be able to finish the game. And because of religious reasons. Fortunately, they did. They completed the game, and they did it in front of a whopping crowd of 14 people.
Wow.
Because they did not let spectators. They closed it to spectators. So it's been a challenge. It's been a struggle. And when you hear that, you're like, wow, you hear all those things, but that's just one school. I'm President Trump, those 15 cases did not turn to zero in, a matter of a week. We're going the opposite direction. So I think we're just going to see more of this. But to me, this just all more speaks to the importance of that being proactive with a policy and process approach. And everybody knows that now, and they're building the policies that they didn't have before. And they're saying, if we get into the situation, this is what we're going to do. The best resources out there right now are from the CDC, I think. The CDC has the interim guidance for administrators of U.S. institutions. I based a lot of the work that I did in developing contingency plans based on what the CDC said. So they're saying this is what you should do if you've identified it in your community. These are the steps you should take who have not identified it in your community yet. And that's been very helpful in starting to develop some of those plans and approaches. Mm-hmm. Then is going to have the question of, okay, so what do we have to do or be sure of or have in place in order to say, okay, we're ready to have students come back? What are the criteria going for restarting?
Yeah, I feel like that's coming back is going to be the next big question mark for many schools. And some think it's going to be so simple, and others, I feel like, are imagining it to be this big dramatic thing. And it's like, we don't know either way. It could be as simple as next week, everything's fine, or it could be as difficult as, like you said, we could be starting a new semester in the same situation. Mm-hmm. And I think the big question that I would ask if we end up there is, how will that impact student retention rates? And how will that impact new students coming in that don't want, if you want to be in an online institution, you would have picked an online institution to start with. Mm-hmm. But especially for a school like St. Peter's, where people are here because they want small classrooms, because they want intimate relationships with professors and fellow classmates and, that type of thing. If they didn't want that, they would have went to Rutgers or somewhere else, mm-hmm. where there's 800 people in a classroom. So people are coming here for a certain reason. And if we don't have that to offer, then why are they coming here?
Mm-hmm.
That's where my
Yeah.
question then comes in.
And so that question, so how are those institutions, the St. Peter's and the yeshivas of the world, going to scale up in staffing and support in order to allow something like this to happen? I mean, St. Peter's, you guys have Rob Adelson. You know, he's your LMS guy. He's your Blackboard LMS administrator. You know, you have, and I know it because I hired Rob for St. Peter's many years ago. And then you've got Nicole with Distance Ed. And then as far as I know, they hired an instructional designer a couple months ago. And I got an email saying, you know, meet the instructional designer. And I emailed her once and I never heard from her. So I don't imagine that there's a ton of instructional design support available just because you got one person that can,
I don't know.
That can only pull so much. But yeah, it's going to test not just institutions' contingency plans, it's going to test their regular processes, their regular everyday processes. So I'll just tell you right now, for St. Peter's, Blackboard is a little free-for-all. And if you've taken a few courses, you probably already know that Blackboard's a little bit of a free-for-all.
Yeah, I'm not a Blackboard fan.
I've got a lot of academic freedom, if you will, to create and set up and modify and build and change my course the way that I want to, which is great for me because that's what I do for a living. So, you know, for somebody that's a professor in a field, you know, maybe they're a great classroom teacher or whatever else, but if that's not their bag, if that's not their thing, you're going to have some challenging Blackboard courses.
Definitely.
And support for that is not going to scale well. So, well, that has been. I'm just dying to see what the next couple of weeks holds.
Well, I think so. What also interests me in you saying that is, I'm seeing this hit home, like literally in my household. My mother is a nursing professor. She has her doctorate in nursing practice, and she teaches at Bloomfield College. So
Okay.
for her, they're on spring break this week, but she keeps saying, like, you know, they haven't told us anything yet, but she doesn't want to move to an online platform because she's a nursing professor. She teaches clinicals. She takes her students, brings them to a hospital and says, we're going to learn by doing. So her moving her classes online for her is like pointless because it's like, I can give you an exam, I can give you a paper, but what is that going to do for you actually physically learning and me knowing you can do these skills? Because it's about the nursing skills, not just about the knowledge. It's about being able to do. So for her, she's, you know, struggling with, well, what are they going to do if that becomes the thing? And I have RAs that work for me that they're, even though classes are canceled right now, their clinicals are not canceled, but moved online. Their clinicals are not. So like one of my students has, you know, she's going to be in the maternity ward on Friday. And she, you know, they already told her not canceled, and that's fine. Like she doesn't mind. That's what she signed up for. But, you know, for like where my mom's at as a nursing professor, she's seeing that literally. She's like, what am I going to do with my students? They need to be in the hospital learning.
Yeah.
And then my sister is a dance major at Muhlenberg College. They actually, as of tomorrow, she'll be home for the next month. They're closed until the 13th of April. The campus is closed and all their classes are moved online. Like I said, she's a dance major. She literally video chatted me last night and goes, Robin, they're kicking me out. And first of all, I was like, well, how can they do that? You have a contract you're paying to be there. Different conversation. And then number two, she goes, well, I'm a dancer. Like, what am I supposed to do? Send in videos of me dancing in our living room? You know, so it's like the type of learning that people do sometimes can't happen online in any way, shape, or form. So that's where I'm kind of struggling with, like, what's that going to look like for those students who need that? And like I said, it hits home. My mom's a nursing professor. My sister's studying dance. You need to be physically with people to do those things.
I did what I think was one of the first RN to or BN to RN.
RN to BSN.
RN to BSN. I got to get my acronyms right. RN to BSN programs online some years ago, and it was for Immaculata University. And it involved a video. It involved the requirements. We actually sent out at the time. This is before cell phones really had the great video capability that they do now. So the little, like a GoPro kind of a small camera was kind of the popular thing. I think I even still have one
Mm-hmm.
on my desk. I sure that it was a
Like
Toshiba
yes,
Camille
yes.
BW10, and I guarantee you that from oh no, this was from Antioch University. We did something similar. And so we
Ah,
would require students to learn to use and learn to upload the file formats and everything else, so that they could do some of those things from a remote basis. And on the one hand, you can say, oh well, you can't learn and you can't do that online and you can't, blah 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 blah. But then you get to a circumstance like this where you don't have a choice, and they're the schools that are going to be ready for for doing some of these things in an online environment. So
yeah.
I used to have somebody I worked with. The first courses that I taught online, it was a hardware A+ hardware certification course, which basically the student had to know everything about a computer, how it worked, how the components worked, troubleshoot it and everything else. I taught it online. All of the students were sent a kit with all the components for a computer. And as part of the course, they had to build the computer. And so tutorials, I had times where they would have trouble and they needed my help. And I would tell them, take your webcam, now point it into your computer, let me see whatever. And I could see, okay, look at this and do this, this plug here or whatever else. And my boss at the time, he said, when a student would say, I can't learn, or you can't do something like this online, I can't learn this online. And he would say, okay, here we are. I'm sitting here talking to you, telling you this, and you're telling me whatever. Now put a piece of glass in between us. If there's a piece of glass in between us, can I still be teaching you? Can you still be learning from me?
Mm-hmm.
No different. It's no different.
That's true.
You're just way over here and I'm way over there. So it's really a change in perspective. I can appreciate that there would be nuances, especially with dance. That would be really tough because I think that you're going to have a hard time having the instantaneous feedback. But at the same time, I got to believe that they're using video for dance all the time. I was in a music.
Yeah.
I did dance in a musical. They did record us as we were practicing, and then they would go, and then during the week they would watch the film, and then they would come back and say, on film we observed that you were out of sync at this part, or your elbowed in as high as everybody else's. So I'll never say it can't be done. It can be more challenging, but the minute that somebody says it can't be done, somebody else is going to be out there figuring out how to do it. So
that's true. Yeah, and they're gonna have to. At this point, she's got a month, that she's gonna be forced to be at home, and that's where she's at. She also, I think, is also worried because she has a couple older professors, that are very classically trained dancers, and that's her, that's their strong point. She also has a professor who is deaf, so doing something like this is not gonna work. She's all visual, so that's gonna be, I think, and she's actually the director of their program. And she's an amazing woman. I've met her, and I think for her that's going to be very tough, I'm sure, because the communication in this form is not going to work at all. So I think that's going to be interesting for them.
Yeah.
As a course.
My daughter, here's a dad brag. My daughter sang at Carnegie Hall a couple years ago under the direction of Eric Whitaker, who is an amazing American composer. Absolutely love his work. And it was a choir of people that they pulled together that she auditioned online. She sent in an audition tape, and they accepted it. And then they sent the music to everyone. And we're talking about a few hundred singers across the country. And they required the singers to record videos of themselves singing their part. They'd practice it, and then they'd have to record themselves singing the actual part. From memory, and then they would send that in, and then they had somebody there that was watching the film and verifying that they were, learning it right and they were doing it the way they were supposed to and whatever. They all at Carnegie Hall like 3 days before the performance, 2 days before, I think. And Eric Whitaker came walking in, grabbed his baton and said, "Let's go." Boom.
So let's go. Yeah,
People
that's
that had never
awesome.
sung together before, but they were all completely ready to go. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
And also, congratulations. That must be great as a father to
Oh, yeah,
experience.
I was absolutely thrilled to death. Especially because, I mean, for my daughter, it was a big moment because she and I both really like Eric Whitaker's work, and her had done a couple of Eric Whitaker pieces, and she had sung a solo in one of the Eric Whitaker pieces that they had done her senior year. So for her to have the opportunity to then go sing, under the direction of Eric Whitaker, I think that was a bigger deal to her than Carnegie Hall or New York or anything else. Was just to be able to sing under Whitaker himself. So yeah.
That's awesome.
So I guess I want to just take a minute. I'm going to pull up the syllabus here quick, and I should probably almost do this as a separate video, but if they don't want to watch it this far into, then well, shame on them. I have it on my computer. Just a second. This is which one? 683?
Yes, 683.
Ah, there it is. Oh, that's the 5 week. I don't want the 5 week. There's spring 2020.
Yeah, I've so much to catch up on here. It's been crazy.
Oh,
I've been on duty all week as well. I got back from vacation, got handed the duty phone, and said, here you go for the week. So that's been a challenge in of itself.
I think the big thing to keep in mind is that, week 14, and I should probably make a separate video about that. The day in the life assessment is that one is an actual interview. Okay. It's an actual interview with a leader in higher education, which at this point in time could be really troublesome getting onto somebody's schedule, but it can be done. I've offered in the past of doing this, of using my contacts and saying that I know people that you could reach out to in higher ed. I've never had a student take me up on that. Somebody or a VP or president or whatever that they can interview for that. So I guess I would say make sure you're thinking ahead to that, because you're going to want to get on somebody's calendar. That's not one that you're going to want to get caught up with at the last minute. And then
just a question quick about that, if you don't mind. Is it can be anyone in the leader in higher education? It doesn't matter what their position is, just as long as they're within higher ed or student affairs of some sort.
Correct.
Okay.
And again, the important thing for me is in any course is that it's got to be relevant to you, the learner. So I if you say it really would help me to talk to a director of admissions or to talk to a student affairs person or whatever, do whatever best suits you. I actually had President Carnaccia do a guest talk on the course a year ago, and he was absolutely amazing. It was just great. So I know he would be amenable even to doing something like that. But that's one to keep in mind. The other is coming a little sooner, is week 9, is the accreditation memo. So accreditation is a big topic, and I'm sure that I will do a video or a chat before that, just to go through the types of accreditation, because it's a very confusing world. And actually, Marissa asked me a really good question about that. I don't remember if I posted the answer to that one in the announcements or not, but I probably should. Because you're talking about the difference between regional accreditation, national accreditation, and programmatic accreditation. And they're all different things, and they have very different ramifications for students. So other than that, that's where we are. I'm not surprised that it's impacting St. Peter's. But they're not going full. Well, you said how long they're going?
As of right now, it is. So they completely canceled everything for tomorrow and Friday, and then starting Monday, we will be completely online until the 25th at a minimum.
Okay.
Is what they've announced.
Phew. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just,
I would.
they're really thin
Mhm.
in support. That's going to be a reach. That's going to be a stretch. They're good.
Yeah.
They're really good people. I have no doubt that they're, technical capability, but it just takes bodies.
Mhm.
So.
And we do have, quite a bit of older, I don't mean that in like a negative way, but,
Oh, I
older
know.
faculty who
Hmm.
don't like using technology to begin with in their classrooms. And, it's also part of, completely different conversation, but working with the different generations and how this generation that's now going through school is very different and wants that and needs that. But some of these professors are not able to produce that. So now they're forced to. So what will that look like?
There's a huge gap between the generation that's teaching and Generation Z,
Yes.
because Generation Z assimilates knowledge in a whole new way, and they approach learning in a very, very different way. I did something, I think about a year ago, maybe less than a year ago, in one of my St. Peter's courses, and I think it might even have been, I don't remember, it was this course or it was one that was similar to this course. Um, I I had to rebuild the course as I was teaching it because the course was just crap, and I didn't build it. I was using it out of somebody else's shell, and I'm like, I told my class, I apologize. This is bad teaching. I shouldn't be making things up as I go along. The course should be ready to go, but if you're going to have a good course experience, I'm going to have to build it just week by week and stay ahead of you. So I built this huge midterm assignment where I had them create a strategic action plan to solve a problem or do something like this. And they did that at midterm. And then I got to the end of the course, and the assignment that was at the end of the course was actually very similar to what I did midterm. And I'm like, crap, we can't use that one now. So I told my class, I said, I want you to tell me what your final assignment for this course is going to be. I don't care what it is, as long as these are the course objectives, as long as you can explain to me how your final assignment evaluates, or it can be evaluated in light of those course objectives, or demonstrates to me that you've mastered those course objectives. And
Mm-hmm.
they loved it. They came up with some great stuff. They created things that they could use at their work, that related to I made a strategic action plan to how my unit can do this to, raise retention or, whatever else. And it was absolutely great. And for my generation as students, that type of final exam would have been a nightmare. We would have
Mm-hmm.
been told, tell me what to do, show me the route, explain exactly what I have to do in order to get all of the points. I don't want to construct my learning. What are you talking about? You're supposed to be teaching me.
Yeah.
So that's the difference between the generation that's teaching now, and the generation that's learning right now.
Mm-hmm. I think that's so interesting because the first one you mentioned is totally, I think that would be amazing. And, in any course, especially one that allows something like that, I think it could be so good for and especially a lot of what you're doing in this course is what each individual needs out of the course, because not everyone needs to do the same type of thing. Not everyone, like you're saying, needs to interview the same type of person. Somebody who wants to be teaching is completely different than someone who wants to be in higher education, in the student affairs realm. And then
Mm-hmm.
also breaking it down, admissions versus res life versus student activities, three different things, even though they're all in the same field. So it is different for everyone.
Yeah, I've actually been developing a learning, I guess you could almost call it a learning philosophy. Howard Gardner has his approach of like the different multiple intelligences and people that learn different ways and whatever. I did a lot of study on engagement and um, what makes learning engaging, and how do you keep learners engaged in a course. And I got it down to three things. And I'm actually presenting at an academic conference on how to make your online learning course engaging using these principles. The three things that learners want in a course, you can tell me if I'm wrong because you're a learner. I've got it
Mm-hmm.
to belonging, agency, and relevance. And what that means is the belonging is that you feel like you're connected and you're part of a community, or you have a connection to, the course or the people in the course and the content. You feel like you're a part. Okay. The second is agency, which is you're able to make decisions about your learning. Okay. I give you the options to choose how you're going to build your learning. So I try to do that a little bit with the PLPs. I let you pick topics are more pertinent to you and focus on those. I try to do that with the assessments as much as I can. And then the third is relevance. You got to understand, the most angry student is the one who's sitting there going, why am I learning this? This does not apply to me. This doesn't matter to my life. So if you can tick off those 3 boxes, the learner feels like they belong, they get to make decisions about their learning, and they see how their learning matters, then you've got a good course.
Yeah. No, I agree with that 100%. I actually just wrote that down as you were saying it because I think it's super interesting.
Yeah.
Especially the agency, like I just said, I think that's amazing. And I wish more online professors would, and any professors in general, not even just online, would move toward that type of mentality, I guess you can say.
Yeah, it's something that I've been working on for 2 years already now. Just putting together this philosophy and this approach. And what I'm trying to do is trying to find a way to measure this. Once you explain some of these principles, okay, so how can I go into your course and measure that you're doing those things? So that's the next phase. So honestly, this is really the whole the picture. To me, a course is built on 3 foundational components, which are the architecture, which means it's well constructed. The modules are set up, you can find everything. The design integrity, meaning that everything works. There's good links that matches the syllabus, matches the course, the assessments match the syllabus and everything else. And then transparency, and that just means that how you're going to be evaluated. What the measurements are going to be. Like there's rubrics and whatever else, and why you're taking this course, and how the course fits into the larger picture of other courses. So that's the foundation. Then the delivery components are the agency, belonging, and relevance, and then actually tie into what science has identified as the 3 kinds of engagement. 3 kinds of engagement are behavioral, relational, and cognitive. And those spelled out. I can send this to you if you want.
Yeah, no, I'm very, very interested if you wouldn't mind.
I absolutely can.
Yeah.
Behavioral engagement is, do learners interact or participate in the learning? Relational is, do they feel like they're a part of the learning community? And cognitive is, do they find value in the learning? So that ties into the 3 areas I was talking about. Mm-hmm. So and unfortunately, that's not how most teachers think about education. They more higher education, because most of them are not trained as teachers. Most of them are experts in their field. So they think in terms of, I know this stuff, you need to know the stuff. So I'm going to tell you the stuff, and then I'm going to test you to make sure that you learned it. And that's it.
Yeah, there's none of the belonging part. There's none in the how do you want to do this part.
Yeah. So
it's
all right. Well, I am going to then, it's been about an hour. I do appreciate you giving me to talk back and forth with, so it'll actually be a meaningful video.
No, I appreciate it. I loved your thoughts, and being able to talk this out on an education level is interesting, because at work it's all about what's happening here, what do we need to do, get all this stuff done, working late, and I haven't had a chance to actually be like, what does it look like elsewhere, or how is this going to affect us in a couple weeks, or what are these professors actually going through? So that's interesting for me to see as well.
Yeah, it's been fun, and there has not been a lot of sleep involved, so it's going to get worse before it gets better, I think. So
yes.
Alrighty, very good. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
I think we'll have to do this again probably in a couple weeks to catch up on what's happened, because it's going to be a fast couple weeks.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Yep. Bye.
Have a good night.
You too.